classically, a deck construction game is a game where making your decks of cards isn't really part of the match in any way, shape, or form, right? So Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic the Gathering, all of those games are deck construction games. You're not making the deck as part of the gameplay. It's still part of the game, because you can't do it without it, but it's not what you do to play a match of the game. It's a difference in format. A game where you play with the same pre-constructed deck of cards over and over again against different people, like Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering, versus a game where the deck building is happening between rounds, the deck is constantly changing, and you want to get through the deck quickly as well. You know, that's part of the format. You start with a deck that only has like 10 cards in, and you draw 5 every turn, and that means that in the first 2 turns, you know you've seen every card. This is the game I was talking about that I played where it didn't have card discards and it just broke the whole format. Because instead of going, oh, on this turn I'm going to play these 2 cards and then I have to throw these other 2 cards away even if they're really good, it's just a smaller decision to go, okay, whatever I don't play this turn I will still have next turn, right? I think one of the things that's different between a deck builder where you generally draw 5 cards, play some and discard some and then draw 5 cards the next turn, and a constructed deck dueling game like Hearthstone is Hearthstone has, like, every game can be a long control game where you get up to like 10 rounds. So the idea of like having a card in your hand that costs 8 energy to play or 5 energy to play and saving it for later is more of a thing, whereas in deck builders tends to be much more like the cards have smaller incremental value and each turn it's about reading the situation rather than planning ahead so much. So yeah, I would play, if you want an example of what I'm talking about, play Arcane Path if it's still on Steam, because it just felt really dull to every turn be able to basically, it's like I'm either playing this card this turn or next turn, and nothing really has any meaning then, because the negative part of the decision of like what to miss out on is part of the decision of what to play. Are there any mechanics you think deck builders don't utilize enough, or mechanics you want to see implemented that you haven't yet? I don't know, it's an interesting one, because I think what people get out of deck building games is like the challenge of learning this whole system, right? So you give them a mechanism that they already understand. I understand draw 5 cards, play some cards, draw some different cards next time. I understand relics from other games. I understand all this. And then the stuff I'm learning is like, when do I use my ability? What are the different restrictions on these challenges that I need to adapt to? It's less like there's a grab bag of mechanics I'd like to see people try, because I think every deck builder needs to present this new puzzle of like, how do you learn to master this system? And this isn't unique to deck builders, it's any kind of game with a strategy or like a build order in. It's about giving people this big possibility space of all this stuff you can do, and then work out yourself what's the best way of manipulating all this stuff. Even if you go back to like old Final Fantasy games, they change the whole system every time, and that's because the joy of learning one of those games is learning the system of like, how do I optimize my party and their abilities and stuff like that, rather than it just being like, here is a game with the same system and different content in it, right? That's the reason why you get some of these franchises like Final Fantasy games where a sequel is a fundamentally different game at a systems level, because that's what fans of the genre want. They want to play a game and learn a new system. I want to learn new rules, you know. And the thing with Slay the Spire is each character has markedly different mechanics to learn. So that's even just within one game. It's like playing the red, green or blue class isn't just, oh, you start with slightly more attack or slightly more defense. You start with a fundamentally different set of rules to learn for each character, and that's kind of what you're chewing your way through as you master these games. Roguebook is the same. Like in Roguebook, you get 2 characters together, and it's about how do these 2 sets of cards interrelate and react. So yeah, it's new relationships between mechanics. That's exactly it. And I think you want to keep as much of the base of the genre the same as possible. I'm sure there are interesting things you could do with how you draw and discard cards, but that's not really where the interesting part of the game is. The interesting part of the game is like, all these things to learn about and things that can be different each time. I think if you just make one big thing fundamentally different, like, oh, instead of fighting enemies until their health is all the way down, we're going on missions and to score stars, which is what we're doing here. That's great, but then you still need to have all of that other variety that makes the game this kind of big mess of puzzles to learn through and strategize through. I kind of don't really think of games as separate mechanics, you know. It's a big interconnected mess of all the things, and how good a particular game feels is going to be about how those things relate to each other in context. We were talking about tabletop earlier. In tabletop, they don't refer to an individual game mechanic as a mechanic, they refer to it as a mechanism. And then the mechanics is like the overall relationship between all the mechanisms in the game. Whereas in video games, we're much more likely to refer to an individual unit of interaction as a mechanic. But the thing about mechanisms is they have to be moving together. And the example I would use is like, if you see a gear, like a cog, you can see that it's meant to be mechanical because of the way it's built, right? But it doesn't actually become mechanical until it's interlocking with other cogs and moving around in a system. And like the whole language of mechanics and mechanisms is meant to imply that these things are all interrelated. So it's often very hard to say, what game mechanic do you like, or what would you do with this game mechanic? Because it's like, well, I would use that game mechanic in a different way depending on which game mechanics are already there, what the theming of the game is, and all of that kind of stuff. This is a recommended game. We've had this was submitted before a long time ago, and it's just been released properly on Friday. So I thought I'd come back and play it again and see where it's got to since then. I really, really like this game. But I often find that when people aren't very experienced try to make a really weird out there game, they kind of put the emphasis on the wrong thing. And that's just always the risk with when you try and do something weird and out there. It's just like the game innovates in a strange direction that doesn't capture what's exciting about the base genre. So I often think if you're trying to do something innovative in a genre, or you're trying to mix genres together, you still need to have that like that idea of what does someone who likes this type of game like to do, right? The appeal of a deck builder is you're doing the long-term strategic planning of gradually adding this stuff into your deck, which is somewhat limited by a bit of randomness because you never just get to pick from all of the cards available, right? And then you have the turn-by-turn tactical piloting of the deck as you play. And I think you can make nearly any change to the formula, but it still needs to acknowledge the appeal of those two things together. That's, to me, what a roguelike deck builder is achieving. A design tweak that would go against that, in my mind, would be when you deck build, the cards you get just don't feel significantly different from each other, right? They are just like... they're just like, this is +1 to this, or this one is +1 to this, and they don't really change how the thing feels to pilot in the game. That to me would be an example of a bad mechanical change, because it's starting to take you away from the core appeal of why you put those things together in the first place. So I think that would be like the criteria I would use if anyone wants to make a deck builder and do something weird with it or change how something works. It's like, you always come back to that question of how does this fit into the relationship between the long-term strategic deck building and the tactical turn-by-turn playing of the cards, right? And that's, like I said earlier, that's the issue with not discarding and redrawing 5 cards every time. That doesn't fit into a deck builder because that means that you don't reliably churn through your deck really fast, right? That works for a deck construction game. Something like Hearthstone, where you keep all your cards in your hand and you draw one more card every turn, it doesn't work as much for a deck builder because it means that instead of drawing 5 cards every time, you're drawing 1 card every time. As your deck gets bigger, you're even less likely to pull out one of those cards that you added to your deck before as one of your rewards or upgrades as you move through the game, right? So I'm not just saying this to say you should discard your hand and draw up to 5. I'm saying it to say that any modification you make to that rule needs to be thought of in terms of this context of like, okay, we're adding cards to the deck over time. That's a strategic decision, and that strategic decision filters down to the turn-by-turn tactics of drawing the cards and playing them, and it does it in a higher volume if we churn through the deck quicker. And if we slow down the churning through the deck, then when I get to pick a card to add to my deck, I'm just going to like go, oh yeah, whatever. Because in a match, when I have like 5 rounds in this game, just like 5 rounds to... If my deck is suddenly massive and I only get 1 card out of it every time, then the cards that I add to my deck suddenly become a bit irrelevant because I'm only going to draw like 10% of them. Whereas with the draw and throw away format, you are drawing through your whole deck multiple times. So it's just one example, but it's like you can do anything innovative with a genre, but you always need to come back to like, how do all the parts of this type of game fit together? And the thing I'm trying to do with it that I want to do that's different, what impact does this have on the overall structure of that thing?